I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this is Outside My Window. Sandra, welcome back to the podcast.
I'm so pleased that you asked me, you two, so it's great to be with you again.
Well, I think, what we were looking, obviously, to do is to get an update on how things are going. I know that when we last spoke, you were in the midst of a bit of a protest about clear cutting on Crown land. So can you give us a bit of an update on where things are right now and how things are going?
Absolutely. So the last time we were facing 2 court charges. One was held in January, and we were released from that. Basically, the judge said this was in Supreme Court in Halifax, and it was a civil matter. And because we hadn't obeyed the injunction to get out of the way of the of West4, the logging company, that's when the charge came up. So, long story short, the judge, in his wisdom, and we so appreciate this because I think he was very fair to both sides and he was very attentive, but he did say that we had the right to protest. Now, agreed we were in the wrong. We did not obey the injunction and we did not move, but he did, and he repeated it. We had the right to protest. So basically the outcome of that was that we were not allowed to go back on Crown land where we had set up the encampment, which was in New France, in the Caribou River and Rocky Point Lake, and that has been dropped, which we are just so grateful. Originally, we thought we wouldn't be allowed on any Crown land anywhere in southwest Nova Scotia where West4 has permission for leases to cut, to log. Anyway, so we're grateful for that. The second one was a more serious charge in a way because it was a matter of the criminal court system, and that was held in Digby. And so we needed a criminal lawyer, which we had, and she was wonderful. The first one, by the way, was there's an eco-justice group of lawyers in Halifax. They're across the country, but they did their work for us pro bono, which was just a gift.
That's nice.
And the second time around, we got a very special rate from the lawyer. And so, long story short there, yes, we were in the wrong. Yes, we didn't obey the RCMP when they came 5 or 6 times, 5 or 6 days, and we still refused to move. So they really had no choice but to arrest us. They didn't have to bring this to a criminal court, but I think they were either ill-advised or maybe too young in the force. They didn't know their options or whatever. So anyway, all right, so here we go. We're in criminal court. And but the lawyer was able to get the judge to agree that if we did community service, then our charges would be dropped, because the main concern for us was if you have a criminal charge and you're found guilty, then there's all kinds of consequences. For example, you can't leave the country. You can't fly to the U.S. or another, so, and you have a record, of course. So this was a great concern to us. We knew that going in, and we knew that when we agreed to be arrested, and we were willing to take that chance. But, oh my goodness, we're so grateful. 2 weeks ago, we are cleared. And so what we did was a community service program, and I'm so grateful that this exists in Nova Scotia. And what we did was a project. The 9 of us agreed to help out with a project to get people signed up for like a healthy forest network where private landowners, like if you had 1 acre or 50 acres or 100 acres, and you were concerned about doing sustainable forestry, and you approached your work in the woods in an ecological way, and you would not have your property clear cut, that you would be counted. And what we're doing, eventually we'll have a map, and it'll come quite soon, I think this spring, in Nova Scotia, where you'll be able to see hundreds of property owners, and it'll be evident where places in the province are going to be cared for and not clear cut. And I think that's a statement that public landowners can do. Anyway, so we're quite excited about it. And because we did our 40 hours of community service spread over several weeks, the charge was dropped and we had no criminal record. So that's a good news story. Very good news story.
So
Yeah.
this data registry that you're working on about for private land,
Yes.
does this come with some sort of a a legacy style setup? In other words, if the landowners agree not to be clear cut, that it would carry forward even after they pass?
No, it doesn't. It's very informal. So,
Gotcha.
for example, you as a landowner, you can say, okay, Sandra, count me in. Here's my property. I have 5 acres. Here are the PID numbers, the PID numbers. We don't use your name or the PID numbers publicly, but we do pin on a map the acreage and the location, okay?
Gotcha.
And it's not, you are joining the Friends of the Forest of Yarmouth County, all right? But it's not a registered organization. There's no formality. There's no rules. Basically, you agree to approach your woodlot in an ecological, sustainable fashion, and you agree not to clear cut. But it's not legal. It's not a binding obligation, and you can opt out any time. So, it's very informal, but it will give the government a picture of who cares, how much people care in the province.
Indeed. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you for that particular initiative, how would they do that?
Oh, call me, 902-648-0462. And you can find me on the web. I've got a website, just my private one, but my contact information's there. I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I'm easy to find. and the phone number is under Tusket, so.
You're also at the farmers market every once in a while as well, right?
Yeah, in fact, when is this going to air?
Probably in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, yeah, because we'll be there this weekend, but again, probably in 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll be there with posters for people to take, stop clear-cutting Crown lands.
Now, I mean, when you talk about species at risk, what sort of critters are we dealing with here? I mean, I notice that your posters highlight moose, which is a pretty big animal, but there's a lot of little critters that go with that, right?
Yes, there are. And the moose aren't all over Nova Scotia. Last year, when we were on the Caribou River area and Rocky Point, that's the whole region in New France. And there's a huge corridor in that region which sidles up to the Tobiatic, and that sidles up to Kejimanchukujik. So that's a corridor that is known for moose. But they're not all mainland moose are not all over the place. Like we don't have it here in Canaan, okay? Anyway, so mainland moose is one of the endangered species in the province. But we also have, for example, where we are protecting or trying to protect a piece of land right now, there's an active encampment in a place called Beals Brook. It's inland from Middleton, about 25 kilometers up on the mountain. And so many of the same people who were arrested last year or who just supported that program in various ways, many of the same people are now protesting this second block of land. It's a small piece of land. It's only 25 acres. But because we have a picture of a moose on that property, we know that there are pine martens, and that's a creature, a lovely little creature, looks like a weasel. Pine martens, wood turtles are endangered species in Nova Scotia. And also there's some very rare lichens that were just noticed, maybe 2 weeks ago. So, and that's a biologist who determined what kind they were and how rare they were. So there's all kinds of endangered species in Nova Scotia, but they don't all live in the same place or location, and they're not all over the place. There are birds, I don't even know their names. So I don't know if this answers your question, but I think it was about what kind of endangered species there were, and I can tell you right now, for a fact there is a very rare species of lichens at Beals Brook. So the government, to their credit, have called a halt to this cut. So it's just on hold for the time being. And the encampment, people are still there. I'm going back in a couple of weeks. But there's somebody there all the time, usually 3 people, and we're blocking the bridge. So it's a major protest. Now we let people through, campers through, people who want to hike, people who are just driving through the region. But we're trying to keep the company from bringing in their big harvester. So we'll see. If it's determined by the government that, yes, there is a rare lichen there, then they will put a halt because they have to by law. They're supposed to by law take care of a species at risk.
Well, that was going to be my question, is that are there not mechanisms in place to protect things like this, species like this, from this sort of scenario? I mean, certainly if I want to build a condo in the middle of a marshland, that's not going to happen. So,
Right.
how is this possible that they're allowing clear cutting to go on when they know that there's these species at risk in the area? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
That's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah, multi-million-dollar question.
So here's the fact. The fact is that we have an act in Nova Scotia called the Species at Risk Act. 2 years ago, in May of this year, 2 years ago, a group of people brought our government to court and charged them with not taking care of our species at risk. The government, the Department of Lands and Forests, Resources and whatever else are called today, Resources and Renewables, I believe, that department was found guilty of not upholding the species at risk. However, nothing happened. So they were found guilty. It's on record. They have not upheld their own species at risk, found guilty, and nothing has happened. So it's like you're caught for speeding. Okay, so you're caught and charged, and but nothing happens. There's no consequence. It's so frustrating. It is so frustrating. Now, I think because of the huge groundswell of activists, of concerned citizens in Nova Scotia, whether it's Owl's Head, I mean, there's all kinds of issues throughout the province, and spraying and this and that. I think the government is finally saying, whoa, we got to be paying attention here. And at some point, they will come out with a plan that says, okay, you can't log in this area, you can't do a 90% clear cut because there are species at risk, and bring things to a halt. But it's not happening yet, and it may be another year or two before that happens. Very frustrating.
Was there not some sort of like when the change in government happened from the Liberals to the Conservatives, did that not change their attitude or their approach?
I'm going to say no. How can I describe it?
I wasn't trying to throw either party under the bus. It's just a matter of, you would think that they would have differing views on this sort of thing, right?
I've got to tell you, the environment is low on the interest scale. And I can understand. I mean, I don't understand why it's so low, but I appreciate that there's health issues. We've got COVID. The government is dealing with a lot. I understand that. But when there is a known species at risk in a region where you've been given a lease for the equivalent of a clear cut, 70-90%, to me that should just be halted. And that's why many groups in Nova Scotia, led by the Healthy Forest Coalition, there was a huge press conference, I'm going to say about 2 months ago, and there were all kinds of groups that had met with journalists in Halifax and media and saying, we've had 20 years of all kinds of reports and recommendations and studies, and this goes through 3 different levels of government, NDP and Liberal and Conservative, and nothing has been done. Nothing to protect our species at risk. And nothing has been done to stop this massive push for clear cutting. And the frustrating thing is that I think sometimes we are seen as tree huggers and we don't want any logging and nobody can cut a tree because it's a sin. And that's not true. The Leahy report very clearly allows and recommends for forestry. It's a good thing. It's a big industry in Nova Scotia. Nobody is against cutting trees in our groups that are protesting. We're against the rampant clear cutting in areas that have species at risk. And the Leahy report recommends up to 30% cuts in place where it doesn't interfere with the ecological balance. And this is a good thing. We have no problem with that. And the forestry companies have said, yeah, they agree to the Leahy report and they will embrace it, but they're not doing anything on their own to make it happen. Right now, whatever can be cut, and usually it's anywhere from 30% to 90%, but there are a lot of places where there are leases called variable retentions. So if you have a lease for a variable retention of, say, 10%, that means that a company can cut up to 20% of the trees. I find that criminal. We all do. And there's no protection for wildlife, for trees or birds or ants or anything else with a 90% clear cut. So we have asked the government systematically put a moratorium on clear cutting. And then once the Leahy report is implemented, then we will be able to believe that there will be sustainable forestry, ecological forestry, and we're all for that. We're all for that. But this government is waiting 2 years. 2 years to implement the Leahy report. It's ready to go now. It can be implemented today, yesterday. That's what's so frustrating. Anyway, so I guess maybe to answer your question, maybe the new government has plans. Until the Leahy report's implemented, we don't see any progress. And waiting 2 years is too long.
Is there any options from a federal level to help? Or is this 100% a provincial thing?
This is a provincial matter.
The feds can't exert any additional pressure?
No.
As a layperson on the outside looking in, it just seems that common sense is right out the window. But I guess that's me.
Well, it's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating, and it's interesting because the company West4 didn't exist until just before the Leahy report was commissioned. This goes back 4 years ago, and then all of a sudden, this group called West4 comes into play, and they are given the management authority to manage our forests in Nova Scotia. And the clear cutting has been insane ever since. Absolutely insane. And you don't notice it. You're driving along the roads and, you see forests, you see trees, and you know, what's the big deal? Oh my gosh, you have to be in an airplane, and I have been.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. As you drive along the road, there's a buffer zone by the road.
Yes.
So it looks like there's tons of trees, and then, but when I've flown into Halifax, it's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
It's quite alarming. And there is a map of Nova Scotia which shows, it's kind of in red, the clear cuts, and it's more than standing trees. It's more than standing forests. It's so sad. It's just so sad. And the most trees left are down in southwest Nova Scotia, and these are where we have these majestic stands. The one that's being cut right now in Rocky Point, which we were protecting last year, but they're in there now cutting, and that's old growth forest. I mean, it takes a couple hundred years to replace that. It's not going to happen overnight. And then, of course, the damage done by the massive, huge harvesters, the compaction of the soil. It's not like going in with a horse, 10 men and a few saws. I'm not suggesting we have to go back to that, but whoa, these huge harvesters, the damage is enormous. And the roads that are built to bring out the logs, with the big transport trucks, that causes a lot of damage as well. So, yeah, the poor environment's just taking a kick in the head. And it's peculiar when you think about climate change and the need for reforestation and the need to plant trees and the outcry around the world about just hacking our forests. It's it seems like a weird thing to be doing right now. We should be planting trees, not cutting them down.
Sandra, I want to play a devil's advocate here and say, there's still lots of forest out there, still lots of woodland. The moose can go somewhere else. How do you respond to that? And why? Yeah, I'll just sit back here now and.
Oh, you want me to be ranting for the next hour? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think he set you up for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have heard that. It's not a big deal. There's, still forest. And we leave 10%. We hear that. We leave these clumps in the forest, for the moose. Oh, my goodness. So let me tell you, if somebody came and said, I'm going to take 90% of your house away, think about that. Just think about that. Or even I'm going to take 70%. Even I'm going to take half of your house away. Imagine. Anyways, I can't imagine that, but that's basically what we're doing. We're saying, oh, here's a little clump. You'll be fine. That's enough for you to eat and live on. One of the things, and I hear this often, well, the trees are going to grow back. The forest will regenerate itself. Now, I don't know about other species. I haven't a clue, but I can tell you about moose because I've done some research, and there is, Karen Beasley is an authority on environment in general and moose in particular. And I've read parts of her study where it shows that in southwest Nova Scotia, because of the acidity of the soil and its low amount of soil retention, that if you cut these trees and cut out a huge swath of land, that would be moose country. The growth that comes back, yes, the moose can eat that, the new growth, the new trees, the new leaves, but because of the kind of soil, the kind of leaves and vegetation that grows is toxic to moose, and it affects their stillborn. They will have stillborn, can have, not all, but some may have stillborn moose, and also it can affect things like their antlers, so they grow these funny, disfigured antlers. So there's a cost there. And then you just keep removing. We've lost a lot of forest in Nova Scotia for agricultural purposes, for housing, for development, for road systems. These are natural things. I'm not saying we shouldn't have them at all, but we have already taken a huge amount of habitat from our species. And I don't have the figures in my head, but I know many of our species already have disappeared. We have lost some species here in Nova Scotia, and the amount of, say we had 5,000 moose in this region, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago. We're now down to maybe 200 or 300. Please don't quote me on the numbers, or I wouldn't want anybody to do that because I would have to do more fact checking, but I know it's incredibly low compared to 100 years ago, 150 years ago. I remember, I'm old enough to, even out here in Canaan, where the fox were just daily occurrences. Rabbits were daily occurrences. Well, not anymore. And I know I've talked with people over in Quinnen, hunters and trappers. They see such a huge, huge difference in the amount of trapping that they can do. And in a huge part, that's clear cutting. Yeah, we just don't have the forest that we had before that would be healthy homes for our creatures. Anyway, I'm starting to babble, so I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I'm sure this has been a very frustrating process in many days for you and others, Sandra. But are there other similar actions of woodland advocacy going on, perhaps in other parts of Canada, other parts of the world that you have seen that you can get some moral support or perhaps lessons learned in your actions?
All over the world. A huge one internationally is a movement, and it's called. Uh, it's a movement that will consider things like clear cutting habitat of species at risk. Will consider that as a ecocide. ECOCIDE. So we all know the word genocide, and we know what that means, and we know how horrific that has been with groups and communities around the world. They're just horror stories. But this movement, and it's a group of lawyers, environmentalists, biologists, botanists, international experts who have coined this term, if you will, and ecocide. And it's wanton destruction of our planet. Like, and they're thinking, of course, of the destruction of the rainforest and the impact on the world and how that is contributing to climate change, and on and on. So I I think that is a very healthy, encouraging thing to know that down the road, and I don't think it's going to be that long, it will be a crime against humanity to do this wanton destruction. Now, we may not see it in such grandiose terms as the deforestations and the damming around the world and, oh my goodness, the mining and so many things that have caused irreparable harm to our planet, to the land. But I think at some point, knowing that this will be considered as a crime against humanity, certainly a crime against the planet, and it will be enforced. And there'll be a jury, there'll be judgment, there'll be court systems set up to deal with it. So I think that is significant at an international level. All across the country, I'm not sure about the U.S., but certainly in Canada, all across the country, we know of groups and organizations that are just fighting so hard. I mean, out in BC, at Fairy Creek, there these immense, ancient, old cedar trees and other kinds of trees that are being cut down and clear cut. Again, in my opinion, a criminal activity. And it's against the pleas of the indigenous people there. And anyway, so it's all across the land. Here in Nova Scotia, I have to say we're very heartened by establishing relationships with our Mi'kmaq. We've had Mi'kmaq elders and the a district chief come and visit us at the last Camp Hope up at Beals Brook. There have been water ceremonies last year and this year, both encampments. There have been smudging ceremonies, conversations, and consultation, and prayers. And this is huge. This is huge. And I think it's all across Nova Scotia. Groups are concerned about not spraying deadly insecticides and pesticides that have been planned. And so, there's a lot more happening. I think people are more conscious, more aware of how important the land is to us. And we can't be superior. We can't have this just this attitude of superiority. I think we need some ecological humility.
Can you talk, Sandra, about sort of the level, and I know you touched on this, but sort of the level of general awareness when it comes to protecting, whether it's woodlands? I'm thinking just recently of the the salmon farm. There was great opposition
Yes,
to
yes,
that, and we know
yes,
that the
yes,
municipality of Yarmouth voted against that. Have you
yes.
seen over the last few years a sort of raising of a general consciousness that we sort of need to protect these, whether they be wetlands or woodlands?
Yes, I think it has to do with, yeah, I see a lot more of this happening, and it was a wonderful outcome in terms of the salmon farming. And again, it's not that the population is against salmon farming. The population is against damaging the environment, because this could, for example, damage the lobster industry in the long term. So you can't have private um, gain of wealth at the expense of the environment, which is really at the expense of the public good. Okay, so it's heartening that people are getting better informed, and there are very safe ways of having land-based aquaculture. Now, it's not cheap, but it's a lot safer for the environment than what had been proposed. Okay, I'll just let it go at that because I'm not deeply informed about that issue. So it's, I think that people are becoming aware of the importance, for example, of where our food comes from, where our fish comes from, eating healthier, taking care of our planet. Also, the value, say, of recreation, like our forests, are worth more than just cutting a tree and sending it to a mill to be timbered, okay, to come out as timber. Now, there's room for that, but there's also huge value to our forests and to our lands for recreational purposes, spiritual purposes. Tourism could be huge. We're not, tourists don't want to go through clear cuts to paddle. There's a couple of places I wouldn't take tourists to anymore because of the clear cuts. It's ugly as sin. And there's no saving grace to a clear cut in terms of beauty or restoration or recreation or spiritual fulfillment. So, our forests are worth more than a hunk of lumber. So I think we can have it all. But we can't have 90% of our forest cut and have it all.
I think I brought this up the last time we chatted, and it's worth repeating, is that, as part of the quote unquote management plan that these guys are in charge of, isn't replanting part of that?
Well, it is and it isn't. And a lot of places, nothing happens after a clear cut. It's just left to regenerate on its own. and it will take a huge amount of time. And as I mentioned, in certain areas, it's not what you want for animals to eat, for sure. Anyway, but aside from that, the plantations that are done, say, by Lands and Forestry or by a forestry group like West4, if they're going to plant trees, it's monoculture. And that's deadly. So whether you have, 5 acres or 500 acres, that's all one kind of tree, and it's planted with a view in mind of harvesting again 40 years from now. That's the purpose. It's not planted as a mixed forest for recreational use, for birds, for animals. It's planted with one purpose in mind, and that's to have another harvest in 40 years. So the motivation is very different in terms of creating forests, and the outcome again is for money. That's the sole thing that you would do. So, having a monoculture is not healthy. It's not healthy for the planet. It's not healthy for the forest. I think farmers have learned that over the years. So they're no longer growing, for example, just potatoes on the same field in PEI year after year. So there's a crop rotation, and so it's a much healthier way of planting. But I think we can't think of our forests as agriculture and planting and harvesting, planting and harvesting, planting and harvesting. Our forests are more than that. They're more valuable than that. And then if you have a monoculture, then you have to, if you have just a stand of fir trees, say on 500 acres, then you have to manage that so you don't have any pests because you want your trees to grow. So then you're employing insecticides and pesticides. And that's not good. You're not encouraging animals. You're not encouraging bugs and insects. And, it's a different kind of forest. It's not a forest. It's like harvesting a field of corn. You're planting corn, but you're just planting trees instead of corn. Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, certainly, again, back to, being the layman on the outside looking in, it just seems common sense to me, but it unfortunately seems to fall on the deaf ears of the politicians and being able to enact their own reports. I mean, they commissioned that Leahy report, did they not?
Oh, yes, yeah. It was commissioned by the government and had huge praise when it came out, and it's languished. It's just languished. And Mr. Leahy has, there was a scathing report. He did an update after 4 years, what's happened, and it's pretty scathing in terms of what the government has done, how far it's come or not come, and it's oh my goodness, I could spend another hour on this, but let's not. Let's move on. Let's move on out of the forest.
Well, and that's not the only thing you do with your time. I, of course, follow you on Facebook. You had a very industrious year. Tell us about your canoe making adventure.
Oh my goodness, Glenn. Well, that was a gift of New Brunswick, and I was just floored. I received a phone call one day, and the media person I work with in New Brunswick said, Sandra, I have a site I want you to look at. It's the Norman Betts owns a company called the Miramichi Canoe Company, and he's been making canoes for years and years. And of course, I love Miramichi canoes. They're famous, and I've kind of coveted other people's Miramichi canoes, the chestnut canoes, I should say. Anyway, so she said, well, he's starting a new program, and so tourists, visitors can go and with him make their own canoe. So he makes the chestnut canoe, and you can buy one, for X amount of dollars, but you can also go for the same amount of money and build your own with them. You'd be kind of part of their team. Now you have to be there for a week, and then you have to go back a few weeks later because the canoe needs time to cure. Once you put the canvas on and paint it and whatnot. Anyway, so she said, look into that and let me know what you think. So I went to the site and I looked around. I thought, oh my goodness, a chestnut canoe. Oh my goodness, I was just drooling. But I wasn't in a position to pull out a huge amount of money out of my pocket and sign up. So I said, this is a great program, and I'll do what I can to promote it through Facebook or whatever. But this is a little richer than what I can do at the moment, maybe ever. And she said, no, we want you to be our guest. Oh, my goodness gracious. Can you imagine? I cried. I was just sitting here in my office, and I cried. And I thought, oh, my. Well, and so it was really a thank you, I guess. I've written many stories about New Brunswick and her people and profile different organizations or businesses or individuals, and I love doing that, and it's been a wonderful relationship I've had over the years with the province. Anyway, so off I go, and it was magical. I had so much fun. So this family, Norm Betts and his wife Laura Giltz, they live in Doketown, and Doketown is right on the Miramichi, and of course it's really famous for salmon fishing, and it's a little tiny community, 879 people, but oh my goodness, it's hopping, and it's all about the river, paddling on the river, fishing on the river. I mean, they come out of the womb with a fishing rod in their hand, right? And salmon is almost a daily meal there. So again, long story short, I had the week with the family in the old farmhouse, and went to a boat shop behind their home, right on top of the river. every day, and we made this canoe. And she is gorgeous. She's sitting in our back carport right now. She's lifted up off the ground, so she's nice and cozy and covered for the winter. Her name is Bella.
Oh,
She's
you gave her a
16 and
name.
half. Oh yes, yeah. She's 16 and a half foot, and it's a cedar ribbed canoe with cedar planks on the outside, and it was just pure joy to work with these guys for the week and build this canoe. So once she was built, you start off by steaming the ribs and putting it over the chestnut form, and eventually you plank it, and eventually the gunnels go on, and the seats go in, and then the canvas goes on, and then she's painted, and so it's a big deal. It's a big process to make a canoe, and at one point, after I think it was our 6th day, then we couldn't go any further because the goop that you apply on to the outside of the canvas, that has to dry and cure for 5 or 6 weeks. So she was just put up on a shelf.
Now that's the waterproofing, right?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. That's right. Yep. And then that's the waterproofing. And then I went back 5 or 6 weeks later with friends who drove me up, and Sue Hutchins and Anna Mallon in their car, and we brought her home. So what we did, the last 2 days we were there, or the extra 2 days, I should say, was put the actual paint. I painted her. It's a smoked salmon, and she's gorgeous. And then the outside gunnel went on, and there's a metal rim that goes on the bow and the stern. And she was painted 3 times, and then we brought her home. Oh yes, she had to be shellacked, and I mean, there's a whole bunch of parts to making this canoe, but eventually we brought her home, and here she is, and she's just beautiful. Now, she weighs 90 pounds.
Wow. That's pretty
so
dense.
Barry and I won't be portaging. We won't be going on any long trips where you have to portage, because that's bloody heavy, and I'm way beyond portaging heavy boats again in my life. But I do have a lightweight one that we can take on trips that have portages. But there's lots of places where we can paddle that doesn't involve portaging. There's a gorgeous system out here close by Quinnen. Quinnen Lake and Big Gull and Great Barren, and that's just a great place to go for 2 or 3 days, and no long portages. And then the Tusket River, of course. I've been paddling on the Tusket. Both Barry and I have been up and down. And I'd love to take her on the West St. Mary's River, which, again, you can start at a point and paddle for 2, 3, 4 days and not have a portage. It's just running the river, So isn't that fun?
You know, I and the reason I watched all of your posts with great anticipation was simply because when I worked up north, we started a program where we had a gentleman come up from British Columbia to do kayak making with the elders.
Oh. Ooh.
And so we had designs on making this some sort of a ecotourism type affair where you could come in and you could make a kayak, and then in the fall when we had our annual resupply by sea, you could back ship the kayaks wherever, to one of the major ports that the boat goes. And so I made one.
Wow.
If I was going to promote the thing as the administrator, I figured, well, I gotta do this. No nails, no screws, everything was au naturel.
Wow.
Of course, it would normally have been done with sinew, but we used a synthetic sinew instead. It was a little bit more reliable and a little easier to deal with. But working with the elders and fashioning the shape of the hull to suit my body type and my experience level was quite the experience. So, in shipping it back, trust me, it does not weigh 90 pounds. Although it's 22 feet tip to tip, and it's wide enough, that it's stable. I haven't had it on the water yet, and I've been out of the Arctic for almost 20 years now. But I got it to a point where we got the canvas on it, and we shrunk wrap the canvas,
Right.
but I didn't finish it. So it's been sitting
Oh,
unfinished for a long time. But the
oh,
wood's still good. Everything's still good. It just needs to be done. And
okay, Quinn, we'll be in touch. I'll be in touch with you.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can make 2 or 3 recommendations of people who can help you finish it.
that would be great.
And we want to get you in the water. You gotta
I
get
know,
in that boat in the
but
water this
I've
year.
also put on 50 pounds since then too. So I'm not sure if I fit in it, but I'd be happy to let somebody else who knows what the hell they're doing get in it and
Oh,
take it for a
fun,
run.
fun. Okay,
But
I'll
it's,
be in touch.
yeah, no,
Yes,
it's great. But
yes.
a lot of the process that you were doing for the canoe, we were doing the same thing. You're steaming the ribs, you're shaping everything all up
Yes.
by hand, and putting things together. And it was fantastic. We had manual drills and a lot of very traditional tools. And working with the elders was fantastic. My
It's so
Inuktitut was,
special, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
you're relying on the knowledge and experience of them. It was the same thing when we used to go out hunting and out on the land.
Oh,
One hill of snow is the same to me as any other hill of snow, but not to them. They know the
no,
difference
no,
between the
no.
hills
Yes,
and where
and the
things
kind of
are,
snows.
and the kind of
The
snow as well.
all.
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
It was so much
Well,
fun.
what a thrill. What
Yeah,
a thrill.
it was
Oh,
great.
I'd love to see your kayak. Do you have
Yeah,
a name
well,
for it?
no, see that's the thing. I'm not done yet, so
Ah.
I gotta be done, and then I'll give it a name, and
You'll
we'll
find a
sort that
name.
part
You'll find
out.
the right name. But I'd love to see it sometime, Quinn. It just sounds wonderful. It just sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Let's chat
And
offline
while
about
we're
that.
talking, I'm just going to interrupt for a minute. While we're talking about kayaks and canoes, like to let our listeners know that there's a great um, boating association here in Yarmouth and region. It's Shelburne and Barrington and Clare, and it's called the Southwest Paddlers Association.
Okay.
And you can just put that in a Google search on the web or Facebook, either one. Where we have a presence both places. Southwest Paddlers Association. So
Fair enough.
right now we've got about 85 members. We used to meet in person during the winter and have programs, but with COVID, of course, we haven't. Although I think this coming month we will be meeting again in person. We alternate when we can meet in person between meeting in the Wedgeport Tuna Museum, or and usually that's a potluck, or at the Argyle Lodge with Jonathan, and then we just order off his menu. And so after we have dinner together, then we have programs. And oh my goodness, if members have shown programs about kayaking or canoeing all over the world, here in Nova Scotia, building boats, and on and on. And we have
Nice.
safety programs, and the membership is $15 a year. I mean, you can't go wrong, Quinn. So I want you
Now
to
you
sign
spend
up,
more than
please.
that on a latte.
Yeah, yeah. And then members also have benefits. So right now we're helping members take cold water boating courses. So if you dump in the winter or when it's cold in the ocean, how do you survive?
I
And
just
then
got
there's
chills
wilderness.
thinking about it. Oh my lord.
Woo!
Woo.
There's wilderness first aid courses. So we give members assistance to take those programs. Yeah.
Nice.
So just wanted to mention that it's a great association, a nice way to network and and have paddles together too.
It's hard to believe that we've been talking almost an hour, but I got
No kidding.
one more question, and then Gary has one more. And so mine is what's left on your bucket list? I mean, you've done so many different
Oh,
things over the years, and I've known you for a long time.
mm,
What's left for Sandra to do?
oh my goodness! I guess I'm doing it.
There you
Um,
go.
yeah, just want to keep on paddling. I don't have any big desires. I used to have desires to travel in different parts of the world, and I'll tell you, Quinn, that I lost that desire to do international travel, mainly because of COVID. And so I started thinking,
Sure.
okay, wow, why do I want to get in the plane and mess up the atmosphere? And I decided, no, I don't want to anymore. And now, mind you, our children are all within driving distance. So,
Nice.
James and Lisa are in Ontario. Well, Barry and I will just get in our car and go see them this spring. And we
Good.
did last year. I could fly, but I'm choosing not to. Now, if
Oh,
they
I much
lived
prefer to
in,
drive.
if they lived in Hong Kong or New York or BC, I'd be getting on a plane for sure. But I no longer have big plans for big travels by plane. I am going to take more time this year, next year, and the next year, just spending more time with the grandkids, with
Sure.
family, have more time to put my bum in a canoe. So those are the things on my immediate bucket list, I think. So there's nothing grand. I have no big plans. There's just a lot of smaller plans. And again, yeah, family and paddling.
It's taken this many years, but you're living your best life.
Yeah, and more time with my camera. I went out this morning and messed around for an hour. Yeah, spending more time with my camera too, and of course with Barry. So that's a given. Just
Well, we can't
more
forget
time with
Barry.
the old man. I can't forget Barry. No. Anyway, so does that answer your question?
Oh, no, absolutely.
What can our younger people learn from watching groups like yours and the activities and the advocacy? Are we going to have, do you think it'll generate enough interest that you'll have that new generation that is needed of advocacy?
I hope so, Gary. I hope so. We are seeing younger people on this protest, for example, at Beals Brook, and that's heartening. That's really heartening. Because last year there were many of us who had gray hair, or were pushing, 60, 70. I probably was one of the oldest ones there, mid-70s. But I think there is more done in the schools. I think there's more of an interest in, for example, outdoor education, environmental studies, community action, what people can do. And I think we do have to involve our youth more. I'm hoping that, well, here's a bucket list thing. I would love to see in the next 2 or 3 years an organization or a group of people find a plot of land. This is not an original idea. I credit my husband with this, Barry. And say we were able to find 10 or 15 or 20 acres of farmland that's not being used anymore, or a vacant field. Nothing stopping us planting a mixed forest. And there's an amazing video. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a Japanese gentleman who coined this term, and he showed how you can grow a forest in 10 years. It is astounding. I've watched it 3 times. I probably have to watch it another 3 times to get the gist of it. I will send you the link that you can post it for people
Sure.
to look at. But I think we could do this in Yarmouth. And there was a forest that was grown out in Saskatoon. Again, I'll send you the link. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to look at. A mixed forest. So we can be planting forests, let alone trees in our backyard, which we do here. But let us plan to plant a major forest in Yarmouth County. Let's do that. We can do that. A mixed forest. We used to have beautiful Acadian forests with all kinds of different kinds of trees and flora and fauna and animals. So I guess if I had a bucket list wish, it would be that.
Well, let's make that happen.
I think we can.
Sandra Phinney, you are a formidable ally in the fight to protect the resource and these woodlands. You and all of your team, and we just want to tell you to keep up the good fight. And it's always a pleasure talking with you, and I'm sure we'll be chatting again, I think.
Oh, I hope so. I love these chats, and I appreciate them. And it's not just me. I mean, there's an army of people out there who care.
Sure.
Thank God. Thank God. Anyway, and thank you for this chance today just to babble. I love talking with you guys. Anytime.
We appreciate it.
Thanks again, Sandra. I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.